If you recall, we were last talking and taking note of how it is that an important task of speech, the new primary activity, that part of its responsibility is to fill out, is to fatten up all the secondary activities. Not only must the secondary world continually reinvent itself, as the Kyroots pointed out, or perish, which is an extreme way of putting it, but I'm sure you didn't mind, because you weren't the one interviewing reality, remember. But somewhere besides this side of the extremity of it being do or die, then part of speech's responsibility specifically is to flesh out the secondary world continually, not just one time of fattening it up and then kill it for Sunday dinner. It has to continually fatten it up, which is another way of saying that speech makes life more and more complicated. Not in any pejorative sense by complicated, not in some sense that there would be, let's return to the bushes and the noble state of feralness, not that. It is simply that life becomes more and more expansive, more and more complex. And speech is the part of it, although it is not normally referred to in that manner. If somebody else was following this ordinary intelligence, they'd say, well, there's some, at least, or they'd probably admit there's some literal validity to that, but they'd say it's in the matter of technology, in the march of science, in the march of knowledge, and etc. And they would absolutely be unable to ever see, well, we're talking about speech. They would say life has become more complex, life has become more modern due to the fact, and then they could begin to make examples, which would all be quite material, hardwired, because of communications technology, because of electricity, because of the use of electricity. And they'd name all of that, which it is all speech-based. But it is part of the job specific of what we were pointing out to flesh it up, and it is yet another way to look at the reason why speech, real useful, just everyday speech, must be always open-ended and inconclusive so that it can grow, play, wrestle with itself, and live to grow again tomorrow. That life cannot be stopped in the secondary world, which would be stopping it speech-wise. It cannot be stopped on some wide program, some wide range of speech, that is, ideas becoming conclusive. You understand that? In other words, if humanity at its highest ordinary city level got its dream that the whole purpose of being a human and being intelligent is to come up with answers, if man got that kind of, or if it fulfilled that kind of dream, which is normal enough, but the dream that what we need are the answers. Forget ideas about some metaphorical heavens. What we want are answers. If they got the answers, that'd be it. That would be the end of the sentence. They would close the book. And back when electricity cost more than the networks and local stations wouldn't stay on, along about 1 o'clock, you could see them beginning to roll that thing, the Star-Spangled Banner, and they're about to kiss you off good night. That's what would happen to humanity if indeed they got the answers, as they call it. And also, right where we're ending, is speech must stay open-ended and inconclusive and in a wide range, is also why you can say that secondary seeds generally do not bloom in the same season in which they are planted. That which seems to have, from just ordinary view, is the greatest impact, a kind of core feeding of life itself, that those kinds of occurrences, sometimes very often reflected in what seems to be historically individuals, but that the full impact of whatever is going on does not happen at the time in which it seems to have originated. That the great religions do not really come up to speed until their so-called founder, well, goes to live with you-know-who. Elvis. All right, so that's more or less where we stopped, but I wanted to, that is, the tape ran out, is now consider along all of those lines. There is another great, ancient, oft-repeated, honorable city axiom that says, Reason deceives us, conscience never. Now, it is normally presented, I assume, under some sort of cloak of morality, or while people are speaking in would-be religious tones. But consider the statement. Now, I could have picked out others, but that just about wraps it up, as you'll, I started to say hopefully, see in a minute. That men, just consider this is a quite honorable, no sarcasm intended, this is hoary in the most honorable sense. City view, a city saw, razor, axiom, proverb, epithet. Reason deceives us, conscience never. And you do not even have to be specifically religious to have your nervous system nod right along, no matter what you want to do. It becomes almost as automatic as buying those cheap $12 coats at the funeral home, that no matter what you try to do, you're inclined to go. So your nervous system has this proclivity to go, yeah. But what is going on? What is the reality? What is the energetic reality behind it? That reason deceives us, conscience never. I was going to suggest to you that this reflects a still extant sense in the minds of man that words, that is reason, is what they're talking about, that words may yet be an incompetent opponent for those older, silent feelings. Well, I was hoping that while we dance with this, that would make some of you sort of, that you were expecting to be dipped, or that we had started out and you thought it was a waltz and suddenly we fell into a tango. Is why I said I could pick out others, but that actually covers it. So let's, all right, we'll dance backwards, run the film backwards for a second. A great city notion. Reason deceives us, conscience never. What it is saying is that, and it cannot help it, is the mind of man, for very good reason, still has the distinct sensation that reason, which is words, that reason is not yet a competent opponent. It is not yet a worthy adversary to feelings. Now, that's not what they think they're saying. But for all of you ex-Arthur Murray graduates, I suggest to you that that's exactly what it is saying. Man does not believe. His mind does not believe, which is the only thing, of course, it can believe, for those of you that want to get real sticky with this. Man's mind does not yet believe that the intellect is up to speed. And that includes the poster boys and girls for the intellect. That includes the intelligentsia of the ages, of today. Those men wearing tweed coats with tobacco burns in them, underweight, noxious, clumsy, spastic, almost living brain stems, I'm sure they would be proud to be called. Even those people. Now here we go, keep dancing. See, I just distract you. And you would think, well, those people are an exception to that. Nay. Nay, nay, nay. Even those people who would say that the intellect is it, that is man's future, that is the only thing of any significance, other than a few crude things like sex and food that we simply must do to stay alive so that we can think. But other than that, it's thought. Thought is it. Those same people are not exempt from what I just pointed out. Because who would be first in line, being the great believers in sequence that they are, notwithstanding that cheap Kyroot, whoever that was tonight, they would be the first ones to get in line if they said, all right, we're going to sign up people here, we're going to start at least a new ad hoc organization, that we've got to do something about these non-intellectual people that wander around believing in fairy tales and religion and conscience and all that crap. Who would be first to get in line? Them. And why? I already told you. They'll be the ones who said, if you understand, I'm using a very extreme but not ill-founded archetypical example of this kind of intellectual person. They would be the very ones, you'd be right to take it in a kind of stereotypical way to respond if I said, would not they probably be atheists? And you'd say, oh yeah. Would that be the ones that they would scoff at the idea of religion? Yeah. Superstition? Yeah. Flying saucers? All that crap? Yeah. You don't hear it? So they would be exempt from, back to the axiom, reason deceives us, conscience never. That they would be exempt from that, right? They would be the ones to denounce conscience, that is, all non-thought. I guess the step was too subtle. Even intellectuals do not trust the intellect, or else they would not have to defend it. Even intellectuals, the mind of intellectuals, do not trust the ultimate power of the intellect, or they would not even have the time. They would not waste one sweaty little breath in even nodding to somebody saying, boy, anybody with a conscience, anybody that believes in religion is a childish, outdated anomaly. A true intellectual wouldn't even bother to go, right on, brother. Much less to say, yes, we need to do something about this. We need to educate our children. We should stop teaching religion. We should stop worrying about conscience. That's all outdated. All that is doing is expressing what I said. The continuing sensation, as ill-spoken as it may be, and as camouflaged as it may be, that the intellect is still no worthy opponent. It's still not confident to wrestle with feelings. And the louder it talks, you're just talking about a squealing pig. No, this pig doesn't mind me holding it. Here, I'll hold it a little tighter. And it squeals louder. Well, no, says the pig holder, you don't understand. Right. The question is, do you understand? Sir, drop that pig. I know sometimes the English language you mistake. I apologize to the man that sometimes you mistake words like pig and brain. I understand it. All right, even though the little point being that the intellect, that all such related ideas and axioms that only the brain can be trusted, or back to requote it, reason deceives us, conscience never, and then its opposite, which is the same thing. Even though this is operational and that it is not any one, even if you found an exception to this, it is not the collective thought of humanity. Otherwise, that is, that humanity, no matter what a person says, humanity still does not trust the intellect. It would be not over feelings. If it did, I feel like we almost stepped in a big tar pit on the asphalt of life, judging from the looks on some of you people. The language, literature, history is replete with this same observation that we are not up to the task of the intellect controlling feelings. Operationally, the proof, if you need it, if that were not so, we would not have psychiatry. We would not have any of the social sciences. People would not ask for advice, whether it be from a psychiatrist or from a friend. I might also suggest that there would be a extremely diminished market for all forms of drugs and alcohol. There would be almost no demand for religion. Many of the over-the-counter pharmaceutical companies' stock would plummet. I could say something about the possible relationship between Mary and the Lamb, but I won't. It is the mind of collective man still does not feel as though the intellect, reason, words, which you've got to remember, we're still talking about that speech is not a worthy opponent to the silent feelings, which is represented in the original axiom as conscience, using reason and conscience as exemplary of speech and silence. of thought and feeling. Mary and the Lamb. I didn't say that. The minds of man are wired up so that it still does not feel comfortable. There is no collective anywhere sensation. There is no collective assumption that the mind is capable, when it gets down to it, of wrestling with feeling. I know I've repeated that 4 or 5 times, but here's the last one, comma, and yet. It is speech, that is, speech and the intellect's job, to try and rise to the occasion. And as always, you have this beautiful internal, unrecognized, unmeasured dance that things are arranged in such a way that if you can see it, if you can at least verbally, I'll take this damn compound sentence and we will wrestle it down and move on. That even whether you see it or not, life has it arranged to where the mind of man, the intellect, the organ of speech, the source of speech, that the mind of man does not have faith that words can overcome silent feelings. Comma. Would you like to have and or but? Or would you be sure and expand this and keep the children away from the conjunctions? I know some of them have been inoculated regarding prepositions, but and or but. Even while things are so arranged, man is still driven, and things are arranged in such a way that it is the intellect's job to continually attempt to rise to the occasion. All right, period. Just so you can think, boy, what a neat sentence. Or just so you can think, boy, what a long sentence. Do you understand? It's Punch and Judy, as always. Punch is the intellect in no wise. I do not believe, saith Punch, that the intellect is capable on any broad stage to controlling, to combating, to being able to even properly dance with, wrestle with, deal with feelings. That's Punch's line. That Gabby son of a bitch. And then Judy says, and yet, speaketh her for speech, it is my duty to continually fight to do so. Now, is that a show or what? It has everything. Tension, pathos, bathos, dirty thoughts. It has an intro, it has a middle, it is apparently will have an outro because they'll bow. And you think, well, I got my money's worth. Even though it didn't make sense. If I got my money's worth, the show's over. That the intellect is continually striving to what? Create a more dependable air conditioner? It's continually striving to do that which it cannot do, as always. And this is just another example of it. In this case, it is continually striving to rise to an occasion to where it is a worthy opponent, at least where it is a worthy arm wrestler with silence, the older 3 primary S's, and yet it is not. Or yet man fears it is not. All men, forget any stray exception, that the collective mind of man is the mind is yet, speech is yet, to be an adequate opponent for non-speech. That the new S on the block, speech, is not yet a worthy adversary. It's not even much of, for you Southern psychologists, it's not much of an adequate running partner for the first 3. If it's speech, and you look at everything that speech has given man, which is everything in the secondary world. Sex didn't give it to you. Eating didn't give it to you. Staying in out of the cold didn't give it to you. Speech gave it to you. With all of that, it is still that speech is not quite prepared to get on the other end of the seesaw with the first 3. If they're going out drinking, speech ain't got a chance. If they're going out picking up girls, picking up ideas. I know this real nice idea. You'll like her. Real attractive hair, and she got a great personality. If they're going to go out and try to pick up girls, speech doesn't have a chance. Speech, and everyone knows it, is not an adequate running partner, adversary, companion, dance partner for the other three. And yet at the very heart of speech, its very heartbeat is driven by the inescapable attempt to rise to the occasion, to become an adequate, if necessary, adversary. At least some kind of control. At least some kind of decent friend to tell the other three, oh, hey, hold on there. But the best they can do is say, hey, hold on there. And in their silent way, they go, why? And speech says, because the Quran says you should. Because our city says you should. Because everybody else says you should. And sure enough, it seems to have some effect. We'll get to that, obviously not tonight. Why do you say obviously? Because I'm the one talking. And the word, well, I had the word here and it wanted to come out. And it said obviously. Is it, and of course we can forget all these external gestures that's happening out there, although it does, but internally, a man says, well, why should I? My wife's not around. How come I can't sleep with this girl? Hell, she's over at her mother's in Chattanooga. Why can't I? The axiom, conscience never deceives us. Of course, in this condition, a man would probably say, it may not ever deceive me. I don't know about that, but I know this. That some bitch won't ever shut up. But what is that? Assuming that you people are grown enough that you are no longer tied to ideas that, well, that's God, that's Jehovah or Allah whispering to me. His feelings run through a certain kind of food processor. But even should that happen, what I was going to try to get you to consider, even should that happen, it is not on the basis that the person involved has some sort of understanding. It's not on the basis that, I said obviously we couldn't get to it, but God, here we are. All right, listen quick. I'm just going to hit it and run before they can call the police. Because we can't get to it tonight. If you ask a person, somebody says, well, wait a minute, there is something to do with conscience, or whatever you want to call it, because here it is, my wife will never know. Why can't I go ahead and sleep with this woman? Or for those of you that are touchy about sex, no. For those of you that are touchy about sex, here it is, midnight. The lights are out in the kitchen. No one's home. And you're still on the diet, and you open up, and there's a piece of chocolate cake. You know? No one's around. Same thing as my wife's out of town. You know? How come I can't sleep with just that chocolate cake just one? No, I can't do that. No, what would Jenny Craig say? In all these circumstances, and if you will, take it a bit more seriously, beyond a piece of cake and a piece of fun, instead of leaving it there, understand that people are expressing, the kinds of people I just made up that do occur, they're expressing what is normally referred to as conscience, that there is some proper way to act, and I'm about to go against it, or the proper way to act is letting itself known. And if you ask the person, if we could play this kind of dirty science fiction internal me jumping their nervous system along with you as an audience, and I said, all right, sir, why is it that you say you're not going to sleep, or you have some doubt that you're going to sleep with this woman, and your wife, your girlfriend will never know? What's stopping you? It's not right. Ah, come on, I know you're not religious. You're right. You don't believe that God's going to get you for that. No, you're right, I don't. Well, why can't you do it? I don't know, it's just not right. I mean, it's not the right kind of strained upon a relationship. That sounds more up to date, sir. Thank you. Do you know that personally? Well, yes, I know that. And by then, if we could be that devilish and we were actually in somebody's nervous system and all this was possible, much less profitable, then I would point out to you, being the astute audience that you obviously are, except for that guy with the pig, and I could say, look over here, and you'd look and you'd realize that's not so. And then you'd be sorry, because I would be very inclined to turn on you and say, what the hell are you looking over there for? The nervous system, as it is developed, up to the level of speech, I'll just have to say it quick. Did you hear that? Or was it? All right, I'll slow it down. The ordinary nervous system does not know anything independently. Anybody that says, no matter if it worked out, if we could drag in the fifth dimension, if we could drag in a more complex unit, in some way it still seemed to fly and be operational, that wouldn't matter, comma, That wasn't a sentence yet. No ordinary intellect, no matter who it is, knows anything independently, even if, quote, what it knew proved to be in some way operationally correct. Do you follow? If some man says it's not right to have sex outside of marriage, if he says that, and what if we moved into more expanded dimensions, and somewhere, if we got everybody into the fifth dimension, and it turned out that, hey, that is a functional fact. That is true. It's even more complex and far-reaching, etc. Even if it was true, then go back to the level here of somebody saying having sex outside of marriage is not true. Whoever said that has no idea what they're talking about. Not just that one thing, but you should know by now. I know you're looking over here at my example. That's why I said don't ever follow me if I could take you somewhere like that, because then if you want, I see what you mean. I couldn't help myself. I'd have to turn on you and say, what are you looking over there for? Nobody knows independently what they know at this level. The mind does not know what it knows. It doesn't matter if it was correct. If it turns out that 2 and 2 is 4 in every possible reality, it doesn't do you one bit of good to say 2 and 2 is 4, I know it now, and by God, you could horsewhip me, and I will not deny it. People have been horsewhipped for less than that and refuse to budge. But so what? For a man to say, I know this, is a lie. He should have changed his underwear to start with. Whatever the hell that meant. For men to say that the intellect is not up to the task of combating feelings, that may be true. It is operationally, observably useful because life is still using it at this level. But for a man to say, I know that for a fact, is a lie. That's just between you and me. You know that. It's not a lie out in the city. There's nothing wrong, and it's certainly no cause to go out and tell people unless you want to show that you're probably 3,000 years more out of date than I thought you were when I met you, to go out and say, hey, everybody that says they know what they're doing, I don't think they do. Everybody's kind of, they're full of bias and prejudice and half-baked opinions. God, what an intellectual breakthrough. Jeez, did you figure that out by yourself? It is simply this. I slipped in the Kyroots to say that it's possible to have independent thought under these conditions. I got to admit, again, just between you and me, is pushing it. Nobody's going to arrest us, so. But the Kyroots point out that if somebody really insisted still that they wanted some kind of definition or some description of this, you could say, and it wasn't just funny, that right now, this is probably, I don't mean me or you, but attempting to do this, whatever it is at any particular time, is the best possible attempt that you can make at, let's say, quote, independent thought under these dependent circumstances. Because to talk of absolute freedom in a 3D world, in a finite world, is insanity. It's not insanity, it's ordinary. You'd be very intelligent. Say otherwise is insane. Well, I'm glad you corrected that. Because an ordinary person here would say, well, wait a minute. There's probably shades of gray in here. To talk about freedom, if you're living in a finite world, is absurd. If you can think at all. It's not even worth it. It's not that it's wrong. There's nowhere to debate. Does man have free will? Well, we have tonight Billy Graham, William F. Buckley, and some guy we drug in off the street, and they're going to debate this matter. And you're going to sit there, even if you got a ticket free, and think, this could be interesting. That shows why you watch TV, if you're that easily entertained. There is no debate to talk about freedom in a finite world. And even the ordinary intellect, you can get them, scientists, good, raving intellectuals, you can get them to admit that this is in some way a finite universe. I guess they won't call it that rather than world or reality. And so once they admit that, their intellect will almost shut down if you try and push it and say, well, how can you speak of any degree of freedom? How can you say that you chose to be a physicist? Then they've got to start giving what? Anecdotal information, which is always the saving grace, is talk about yourself. Wait a minute, and you start proving logistically, you start proving logically. You draw again the ghost of those who have walked before us. Bertie Russell, Professor Whitehead. And so I can prove to you, just listen a few seconds, I can prove there is no such thing as freedom. We cannot be free here. He'll say, well, listen, I played those kind of symbolic logic games back in college, you little smart whippersnapper. And I know what you mean because I used to play around. We'd sit and discuss that, but wait a minute. I'm talking now for Professor Whitehead, Bertie, John Locke, or somebody. I'm talking for the city intellect. And they'd say, I know all that, those kind of sophomoric philosophical games. But let me tell you something, lad. I think it was, I don't know, it was about 48 or 49. I was doing my undergraduate work at Harvard. No offense to the dear departed Bert. But when in doubt, all you've got to do is turn an ongoing activity, the service of the intellect, into a product. That is, one way of describing it is, turn whatever it is you're going to do. That is, turn away your ignorance. Take the cloak, the camouflage blanket, as one Kyroots pointed out, of metaphors, and you throw it over the unkept bed of eternal ignorance. I can change the metaphor even while I say it. Instead of talking about throw the blanket of camouflage, the metaphorical blanket of camouflage, call it the anecdotal blanket of camouflage. At least you think we're picking on philosophers. That just shows you haven't been tuned in to your own WDNA station. You hadn't been listening to your own lamb talking. Because when in doubt, when it's all being broken up, and when you're faced, whether it be this specifically verbally couched or not, but when you're confronted with, are you free? Did you choose to do that? Do you know what you're talking about, in other words? And it's to the point that almost verbally, almost grammatically, that you cannot get out of a corner of some sentence, some dialogue with somebody else, if it's just yourself, but better yet, somebody else. What do? You just never listen. It's not just a joke at the expense of somebody that's trying to weasel out. It is a constant. It is part of the job of speech. There's nothing wrong. But when you can't explain, you can't defend that you're not free, you can't defend any attack on it, even if it's self-directed, we all fall back to, well, let me tell you what kind of guy I am. And you can even start it off with an apparent small kick at your own ankles, like, yeah, sometimes I'm not as free as I think. I like to say, yes, I'm a self-made man. But I've got to admit, and I'll give you a small exception to start with, I've got to admit, I guess my choice of going into science had to be affected somewhat because of my father. You understand? It's like playing good cop and bad cop. It's like slapping yourself around like, yeah, wait a minute, I'll admit anything. No, I won't. Now, come on, you better admit it. It'll go easier on you if you admit it now. That's what people tell themselves when they know it's not true. They go, well, okay. And it's funny you mention that because the last time somebody was slapping me around, you'll enjoy this. If you just listen and you go, well, tell me more. We're out of time, right? Well, just as a joke, I'll say, remember where we left off and we'll pick it up next time.